Hello top sellers! In our last video, we discussed about the deal closing process for developer-owned listings or project selling. Today, we will be discussing the deal closing process for general brokerage. This is more tricky and requires more skill. And if this is your first time to close on a private listing or general brokerage, ask your lead broker to help you with the process. There are 4 steps in the deal closing process for brokerage. So step 1 is due diligence. Due diligence is the first step to closing, and the purpose of doing this is to make sure that the title is clean and all the payments are updated. So to do your due diligence, you will need to get the following documents. At ROD, get a certified true copy of the title. City Hall, get a certified true copy of the tax declaration for the building and for the lot. So there will be 2 if it's a house and a lot. Only 1 if it's a lot only. Certificate of latest and existing, certificate of no improvement, this is for lot only, and then tax clearance. And then from the subdivision, get a homeowners association clearance and ask for an updated receipt of utilities from the seller if it's a house and lot or condo. To get a certified true copy of the title and tax declaration, you will need 1 valid ID of the seller as well as an authorization letter allowing you to request for these documents on the seller's behalf. So this new policy was implemented just in 2021. Prior to 2021, you could request for a certified true copy from City Hall and ROD on your own. But now you will need for an authorization letter to do so. As for the fees for the certified true copy of the title, it depends on how many pages the title contains. If it's only like 2 pages, that should be around 200 plus. But for titles of properties inside subdivisions, the deed of restrictions is usually attached to the title. So usually the fee for this would be around 400 to 600 depending on how many pages it has. So for the documents to be requested from City Hall, it's usually just about 120 pesos. Now for the second step, prepare the closing documents. So preparation of the closing documents is mainly the responsibility of the attorney who will notarize the deed of sale, but as the broker, you will need to facilitate this process and make sure you're on top of things. It's also the broker's responsibility to provide the attorney with all the necessary documents so that he or she can make the closing documents. Now, what are the closing docs to prepare? So first is contract to sell. This is for installment purchase or for bank financing. Deed of sale, acknowledgement receipt of the payment from buyer to seller, and 2 valid IDs of both buyer and seller. So SPA to sell is also needed if the seller is based abroad or if the seller cannot be present during signing. And SPA to buy will be needed if the buyer cannot be present during signing as well, unless you will make a unilateral deed of sale wherein only the seller has to sign. The buyer does not need to sign, so no need for SPA to buy. And then verified TIN, make sure to verify the TIN of both buyers and sellers to make sure that there are no snags in the title transfer process. And then payment, the buyer will also need to prepare payment in the form of manager's check, which is good as cash. Also prepare for an acknowledgement receipt for all the documents that the buyer, seller, or processor will be receiving. So this is for everybody's protection so that you will have a paper trail as to where the documents are, because sometimes the one client will say, you weren't able to give this to me, and then you will say, no, I was able to give it to you during closing. So how will you know which is which? So you need to have paper trail. You need to have an acknowledgement receipt and then show that to the client saying you signed this document and you acknowledge the receiving of all these documents on this date. So it will protect all the parties involved. Now, TIN stands for Tax Identification Number. It is a unique set of numbers assigned to each registered taxpayer in the Philippines, and you need this every time you transact with BAR. So this is why your TIN is needed every time you buy or sell property in the Philippines, you transact at the bank. So it's one thing that you will always be needing, and each Filipino can only have 1 TIN. So it's important to keep a record of your TIN. So there was this one time when I wasn't able to verify the seller's TIN, and the documents were already forwarded to BIR for the title transfer, and we found out that the seller's name and the BIR records got misspelled. So it took a while to fix this problem because my client had applied for her TIN in Manila. It had to be changed there. So the title transfer process got delayed for a year. So that's why now, whenever I close deals, I make sure to get the TIN of both parties verified in advance. So in this step, once all documents have been prepared by the attorney, then I send it to both clients so they can check it. It's critical to get all the data right, such as the title number, spelling of the names, because we can't have any errors in the deed of sale because corrections are forbidden. And then step number 3, set a closing schedule. Once due diligence has been completed and all documents have been approved by both parties, the buyer and the seller, then we schedule a closing date. So there are 3 parties that the broker needs to coordinate with for closing. We have the buyer, the seller, and the attorney. If the buyer has a preferred processor who will transfer the title to him or her, then I will also ask the processor to be present during closing so that we can immediately turn over the documents needed for the transfer. Here in Truly Wealthy, we already have processors that we refer to our clients. So you can ask your head broker who our processors are so you can offer their service to your clients. And the last and final step is finally to close the deal. So we usually do it at the attorney's office or at the bank. In this final step, all the documents are now ready for signing, printed out and ready for signing. So documents to bring for closing: for the attorney's side, the contract to sell if applicable and the deed of absolute sale. And then for the buyer's side, the buyer will prepare the manager's check and the SPA to buy if applicable. For the seller, SPA to sell if applicable, and seller needs to bring the original title because he will be turning it over to the buyer upon closing. Now, for the broker or agent, we need to bring the certified true copy of all the documents of the title, the tax declaration for the house, for the lot, certificate of latest and existing, certificate of no improvement, tax clearance, the HOA clearance, the receipt of the utilities to make sure that they are updated during closing, and the TIN verification slip of both buyer and seller. Also, the acknowledgement receipt for the payment, the acknowledgement receipt for all the documents that will be turned over to the buyer, the seller, or the processor. And that's it for the deal closing process for general brokerage. Now, go close your first sale.